In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. As he walked by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. This is my first address to the convention as your diocesan bishop, my first actual bishop's address. I've spoken to the last 4 conventions, but they were sermons, really, and I kind of know how to do that. The bishop's address is different, and I want to get this right. I've heard a lot of bishops' addresses. Some, you have to say, have been better than others. I think this is about my 40th convention. I've been as a student in high school, a student in college, a visitor, a seminarian, a deacon, a curate, a vicar, a college chaplain, a rector, and a bishop suffragan. But this is my first time as diocesan bishop. I've been thinking about what I want to say in this moment. I want to do this right. People out there are actually paying attention. I've written down what I'm trying to say, which I almost never do. A committee full of people will get copies of this address, and they will be charged to make it make sense. A month or so ago at the Cathedral Church of the Advent, we had the investiture of the 11th Bishop of Alabama. It was the event of the season. The presiding bishop was there, and about 25 other bishops from all over. It was a full-blown pomposity of bishops. A lot of our family was there. Our children led the reading of the psalm. Friends from Mississippi and Alabama met and gathered together. The church was beautiful. The music was spectacular. It was a grand, meaningful, wonderful service. My friend Duncan Gray III, the Bishop of Mississippi, and the son and grandson of former bishops of Mississippi, preached the sermon. He said a lot of nice things about me and didn't tell a few stories that are better left untold. And he remembered in his sermon that a few years ago I told him that I had taken the blessing that I remembered his father and grandfather using, and with nobody's authority but my own, added a little bit to it. The blessing comes from verses from the 12th chapter of the letter to the Romans and starts with, "Go forth into the world in peace, be strong and of good courage, hold fast to that which is good." Actually, that verse 9 from the letter to the Romans is, "Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to that which is good." Talking about choosing good over evil. And it's hard to argue with that. But I told Duncan I'd always thought of that part of the blessing as supporting the Episcopalians' innate desire to keep things the way they've always been. Hold fast to that which is good. That's the way we've always done it. We might struggle from time to time about choosing good over evil. Actually, it's not always easy to identify which is which. But keeping things the way we imagine they've always been, holding to that which is good, we got that. No problem. The problem is that the way we've always done it isn't always going to be enough. The church our grandparents were baptized into is not the church they passed along to us. And the church we pass on to our children and grandchildren cannot be the church into which we were baptized. The world changes, as it always has. And we have to choose within every generation. Will we remain in conversation with the world our Lord died to save and calls us to serve? Or will we become a museum dedicated to the fond memory of how things used to be? Holding fast to things which are good is a good thing, but it's not enough. So I added a verse that recurs in the Psalms. Sing to the Lord a new song. Hold fast to that which is good. Sing to the Lord a new song. That, I think, is our challenge and our great opportunity. The tension between those two ideas is the business of our church in the decade to come. How can we hold fast to that which is good and sing to the Lord a new song at the same time? Either one by itself is insufficient. A museum of days gone by at one extreme, and the church of what's happening now at the other. But that tension between keeping what is good and true and strong from the goodly heritage of 20 centuries of Christian teaching and worship, and finding new ways to proclaim the good news of the love of God in Jesus Christ that can be inviting and compelling and meaningful to people who desperately need to hear about unconditional love and real hope in the 21st century. That's the work we've been given to do. Some of the clergy have already heard this part because I told this story at a clergy reflection day. So if you were there, and if you remember it, you might want to take the next few minutes off. Or maybe it won't hurt you to hear it again. One of the great treats of my childhood was to go fishing with my dad. Usually he took my brother and me both, all three of us trying not to hook each other as we sat in a 10-foot aluminum boat. But there were times when he took just one of us or the other, and that was an extra special treat. One hot early summer afternoon when I was 9 or 10 years old, Dad took off from work early, which he almost never did, and took me fishing. My brother had baseball practice or something, he couldn't go. It was just me and Dad. I don't remember the real name of the lake. My brother and I always called it Stump Lake because of all the dead trees and limbs and stumps in it. We hated all that stuff because it was so easy to hook. Dad loved all that stuff. He called it cover. He said it made the fishing better. Dad and I paddled out to a fishy-looking spot, and Dad got a rod and reel all ready for me. I picked out my favorite lure, a noisy little red and green gizmo that splashed and went chick-chick-chick-chick as I reeled it back along the surface of the water. Dad assured me that there were times when that was absolutely the best lure in his tackle box, and told me about big fish he had caught with that lure. Mostly, I just wanted to be able to see it. I wanted to keep away from hooking a stump or a limb. I loved being out on the water. I loved fishing with Dad, but the most important thing to me was not catching a fish, but not hooking a stump. If I caught a stick or a stump, Dad would have to interrupt his fishing, put down his rod and reel, paddle over there to where I was stuck, and try to dislodge it from whatever I'd hooked. I figured it would be more enjoyable for him and me both if I just kept my lure on the surface of the water, away from the stumps. Meanwhile, Dad was using a plastic worm, a 6-inch long fake worm that had the hook, the tip of the hook, embedded in it. The idea here was to throw the worm out there and let it sink to the bottom and then reel it in very slowly, keeping the line taut, so that when you felt a fish tug on it, wham, you could set the hook and land the fish. Dad was really good at it. He tried several times to teach me how to do this, but I had a hard time distinguishing between the tug of a fish and what it felt like when the worm went over a stump or a stick. So that as I was keeping the line taut and reeling it in very slowly, and I felt something, and wham! Most times I would hook a stump or a stick. So I thought it was best to stick to my topwater lure so I could keep that pesky hook in sight. Dad kept telling me I needed to switch to a plastic worm. They're tearing these worms up, bud. But I was just as glad not to catch a stump, content to see my little lure skittling across the surface, unaffected by stump or fish. That afternoon, Dad caught a really nice one, the biggest fish of the day. And as he was working to get the hook back out, he was telling me that I need to switch to plastic worms. I was trying to convince him that I was okay with things just the way they are. He stopped what he was doing and looked at me funny and said, "Key, do you want to catch fish, or are you just playing with the bait?" I thought the answer was obvious. If we're going to answer Jesus' call to fish for people, if we're going to take seriously our call to share the gospel of Christ, if we're not just playing with the bait, we need to take seriously what bait we are using and pay attention to what's going to work and what's not. We can choose to hold fast to that which has been good in the past and keep using the same bait, even though today it might not be working so well. It's safe that way. It's familiar, and we like it. That way we won't catch any stumps, but we might not catch any fish either. Singing a new song will not be so easy, not be so comfortable, not be so safe. We might hook a stump or two, and we'll have to paddle over and make it right. But maybe that wouldn't be such a terrible thing. And maybe we'll catch the biggest fish of the day. In 1968, a priest in the Diocese of Mississippi worked with a man in the mental health field to bring people with mental and physical disabilities together for a session of summer camp. They set it up so that all the campers would be assigned to activity groups, and they made an elaborate schedule so that every day each camper would go to the activities on their schedule in the order that it was written on newsprint. The same schedule every day, so that the campers wouldn't be confused. In 1971, when I was 15, I went to that camp to be a counselor for a cabin full of boys who had just finished the 3rd and 4th grade. And at the end of that session, a college girl in a blue bathing suit came and asked me if I would come back and be a counselor for a special session. Strange, the things that will change your life. It was an amazing week, and I learned a lot. Most importantly, that the children of God come in all shapes and sizes and colors. I still have my name tag from that week, Mr. Key, written in big red letters on a 3x5 piece of thin plywood. My camper's name tag said Neil. I worked at that session through high school and college, and when I came back from seminary in 1981, I was on the adult staff of the special session. It was no surprise that everything was just the same as it had been 10 years ago. It was the way it was supposed to be. In 1983, I was asked to direct that session, and I wanted to do it right. Before the campers came, we got it all set up, made sure the activity groups had equal numbers of campers arranged by their abilities and disabilities, made an elaborate schedule for activity groups, and made name tags for everybody. The way it had always been done: Mr. Bob, Miss Kathy for staff, Susan, Kevin for campers. I wanted to carry on the great traditions, keep everything just the way it had always been. I wanted to do it right. The week went well, as far as I remember. It's hard to stop those people from having a good time. As the campers and counselors were leaving at the end of the week, my friend Harry came and talked to me. He had been in college the first time I was a counselor, and had talked me into staying that first special session in 1971 when I was scared. I was excited that he had agreed to be on my adult staff. I asked him how he thought it had gone, and was surprised when he told me that he was very disappointed. He asked me if I was serious about treating people with dignity and respect, or was that something church people just say? I asked him what he was talking about, and he told me that if we were going to treat people with dignity, we would ask them what they want to do instead of scheduling all those decisions for them. I said, but what if all they want to do is swim in the pool every time they can? And he looked at me like a fool and said, then let them. I told him it would be chaos. That's not the way we've always done it. It would confuse the campers. He told me we were more interested in maintaining control over people than treating them with respect. And while I was still working out some way to defend myself and the camp and the church from this unfair, unwarranted attack, he poked my chest with his finger, right there where it said Mr., and asked me why the staff was Mr. and Miss, and the campers were not. I started to tell him what I'd been told when I was 15, that it was so that there wouldn't be any confusion about who was a camper and who was on staff. But before it got from my brain to my mouth, I realized that was just stupid. It's not really hard to tell who's a camper and who's on staff. And then it occurred to me that that's exactly the wrong direction. We ought to be intentionally confusing about who's a staff person and who's a camper. If we're all going to be children of God together, those distinctions should be done away with. Still, I had to defend myself, and so I fell back on the tried and true Episcopal bureaucratic position and mumbled something about tradition. Harry poked me in the chest one more time and said, "You are trapped by your traditions." And he was right. And it was time to change. So the next year I told the staff that we were going to try something different. I called it Plan B and assured them that we were going to give this a try, but if we didn't like it, we'd go back to Plan A, the way we've always done it. I told them that I wanted all the name tags to just use first names. No Mr., no Miss. And during activity periods, I wanted the campers to choose what they wanted to do and go where they wanted to go. The staff, especially those who had been there before, rose up in unison and told me it was going to be chaos. It would be confusing. That's not the way we've done it. It went against our tradition. I was going to ruin special session. One of the know-it-all counselors, that means they've been there twice, asked me what was going to happen if they wanted to go to the pool every time the pool opened. And I smiled because I had the answer. Then let them. It's their week. They want to swim every time the pool's open? That's great. I directed 10 more sessions, special sessions in Mississippi. We never did go back to Plan A. In 1993, we moved to Alabama. In 1998, we had the first special session at Camp McDowell, where nobody even knew what Plan A was. A new song, a song of dignity and respect. We have so many things to be proud of in the Diocese of Alabama. So many good things are going on to proclaim the love of God in Jesus Christ. Some of those programs and ministries we'll hear about while we're here. Some programs we share as a diocese, some are from individual parishes or individual people. We give thanks for 1,000 different ways the light of Christ is shared, and for those who give their time, talent, and treasure to let it shine. We are building on foundations others have laid, and there are many, many good things to which we know we need to hold fast. But what more could we be doing? How can we sing to the Lord a new song? What are we supposed to do? How can we offer the good news of the love of God and Jesus Christ to a world today so that it is inviting, meaningful, and compelling? How can we become better fishers of people, better disciples of Jesus Christ, called to love God and the people of God? What is my vision for the Diocese of Alabama? If I were somebody